You have to be really intentional about putting a team together.
Crawl out of the pound and start screaming. How good is Joey Bosa?
Herbert, rolling, looking, throwing, end zone, touchdown, intercepted. Derwin James. Derwin was there.
You got to be on a mission every day in the NFL. But even more than that, you got to be on a mission together.
Great hands, Keenan Allen.
The Los Angeles Chargers select Rashawn Slater.
Asante Samuel Jr.
That was late. Oh, I'm stopping y'all boys. I can't catch it.
Intercepted. Picked up by Michael Davis.
Explosion. Explosiveness from Ekeler.
There's Murphy. Boy, he blew that up, didn't he? It is picked off. Nasir Adderley. 50-50 ball is 100%. Mike Williams.
Ojena Nwosu. And that will end it.
Time to bolt up.
Welcome to another episode of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LA Football Network. You can, of course, find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at LAC_Unleashed. If you are looking for year-round Chargers content, special guest episodes, be sure to subscribe to Chargers Unleashed on YouTube and wherever you find your podcast. This episode, of course, is being brought to you today by Brewery X, UFC Fit in Temecula, and Chargers Bolt family. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome and thank you for checking us out. Super excited today. With the NFL season currently underway and week one in the books, it is time to look forward to the Chargers' next matchup. And there is possibly no other better way to do this, to look forward to the matchup between the Chargers and the Dallas Cowboys, than to bring on a very special guest. And as he does so well, Dan Wolkenstein, the floor is yours, sir.
Yes, we are on to week two, and the Chargers versus the Dallas Cowboys matchup is up. So who better to help get us prepared for this Sunday's game than the play-by-play announcer for the Dallas Cowboys himself? Oh my goodness, here we go. He also writes for the Dallas Cowboys covering the team. You've heard his voice on college basketball championships, Super Bowls, college football, one of the greats in the business. We are fortunate enough to sit down with the voice of the Dallas Cowboys, Mr. Brad Sham, to talk about the week's matchup versus the Cowboys. Brad, welcome to Chargers Unleashed. Grateful to have you joining us. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you very much. Great to be with you. Thank you for the kind words, and delighted to be here.
You're very welcome. Now, I feel so lucky to be able to get to talk to you about this matchup. We talked a little bit offline. I have a ton of family who live in Texas. I've been visiting San Antonio for the holidays since I was a little kid. Tons of Cowboys fans in my life and my family. Excited for this matchup. This one feels like it has a bit of extra juice between me and some of my family. So much we're looking forward to getting into with you. Got the return of Dak, your perspective on the 2021 season, of course, went into the matchup, and storylines going into the game versus the 1-0 Chargers at SoFi Stadium. But you've covered this Cowboys team for a while now, and nobody knows this team better than you. Coming off of a hard-fought loss to Tom Brady and the Bucs, what's kind of like the sentiment? What's the vibe like in Dallas now as the team kind of prepares to kind of turn the page, face off against the Chargers this week?
You know, Dan, it's funny. It's one of the very few times that I've ever seen the kind of public mood be really positive after they lost a game. Usually they're taking out measures of rope and looking for ledges to jump off of. But I don't think anybody expected them. I would say I did not expect them to be ahead of Tampa Bay at home. Great atmosphere there with 1:24 to go, especially having been down by, I think, 11 points. And then they were ahead. I would not say that they should have won the game, but they certainly could have. And they made a lot of mistakes throughout the game and still were able to hang in there. And I'm not sure that anybody in this part of the country really thought that they were going to do that with Tampa Bay. And so now here's their problem. One thing I've learned is that from 1 week to the next, last week has nothing to do with this week. And people here probably think the Chargers are still in San Diego. And I have been trying to tell them that this is a really difficult game. I don't know if I was more impressed with a quarterback in the last half of last year with any other guy than I was with Justin Herbert. He just tremendous And obviously the pedigree of their defense with their coaching staff is outstanding. And the fact that they just went on the road and beat a team with a much better defense than Dallas is bringing into SoFi, that is all pretty daunting. And so if the Cowboys are 0-2, which would not be the end of the world, they got plenty of time. And in their division, I think they can manage that. But if they are 0-2, trust me, it'll be a different vibe than it is after almost beating Tampa Bay. And that's because I think people don't understand what the Chargers are all about.
Now, Brad, looking at this week's matchup, I mean, you just mentioned the differences in the defense between Washington and Dallas. I mean, you flip it over to the offensive side of the ball, the Chargers are going to have their hands full, obviously, with the return of Dak, Ceedee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Zeke. You get Zach Martin back from the COVID-19 list. The Chargers' defense has obviously improved now with a healthy Derwin James back. We know that he makes that defense a lot better. And we could dissect this so many different ways with these matchups. But with what you've seen from both teams in week one, what are the key matchups that we should be watching between the Cowboys defense, or the Cowboys offense and the Chargers defense coming into this week?
Well, actually, I was just watching the Chargers-Washington game before I jumped on the line with you guys. So, I have to watch a little bit more of their defense, but I mean, I know they have some great players. You know, the safety's a great player. Bosa's a great player. And then if you just look at the accomplishments of the head coach when he was with the Rams and see how he got this job, then you understand that this is a team that should be, I'm talking about the Chargers defensively, should be, I think, taken more seriously than they should, than I think they are being. Now, that said, I mean, the Cowboys are pretty good on offense. You know, they're not going to have their right tackle. And Lyle Collins got suspended for some kind of a drug violation. He's going to miss 5 games. So now the great debate in town here is, should they move Zach Martin to right tackle, which he did a couple of games last year because their line was a mess. Their tackles were down, and I mean, it was awful. And so it got bad enough at one point. The guy who, Jerry Jones, went on the radio this morning when Mike McCarthy was not speaking today, and apparently announced that Terrence Steele would be starting at right tackle. Steele's a second-year player, a free agent from Texas Tech. He made the team last year in that bizarre year as an undrafted free agent, and when Collins was injured, he stepped in. I think he started 14 games last year. Now, that doesn't mean he started them and played well, but he started them. And so the dilemma that they have is that Connor McGovern, who played right guard for Martin and who played a good bit in his first real year of competing out of school last year, he had a pretty good game against Tampa. And so there are some people here. McCarthy's going to have to answer a lot of questions this week about why it's not better to have McGovern at guard and Martin at tackle than it is to have Martin at guard and Steele at tackle. And, of course, Steele can answer that by going out and playing well. But that's the conversation that's going to be going on here. And I think that they're going to have to figure out the best bunch to kind of try to keep the Chargers front at bay. And then we've got an interesting game because, I mean, the Cowboys are pretty good on offense. They've got some weapons, and I think Prescott's a good quarterback. And so it should make for a really interesting game. Now, you guys can tell me how much support from Chargers fans they'll have. This is the kind of game I've seen from time to time that Cowboy fans have managed to get their hands on some tickets, and so there could be more than a little Cowboy support in the stands at SoFi, and that might be something that would inspire them a little bit. But I don't know. I'm just guessing on that.
Oh, you're not wrong. There's definitely a huge Cowboys contingent following that's in California, obviously with the team that when they do their training camps in Oxnard, I do not doubt at all that there will be a good showing of the Dallas Cowboy fans at SoFi this weekend. No question. Now let's flip it opposite here for a second. So let's look at it from a Chargers offense to the Dallas defense for perspective, because obviously the Chargers have weapons of their own with Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Ekeler. Coming off of the year that Dallas had last year defensively, they obviously made defense one of their biggest priorities in the offseason, specifically in the draft. You bring in guys like Micah Parsons, Linval Joseph, one of Dan and I's favorites, draft prospects, Israel Mukuamu. What have you seen from this defense, these defensive rookies so far, obviously throughout training camp? And what should Charger fans expect to see from that defense on Sunday?
Why were you guys on Mukuamu? Who in the hell was on Mukuamu? Nobody knew about Mukuamu.
Dan, go ahead.
So we actually were fortunate enough to have some guys going into the draft, and one of the ones that I saw that I actually really liked because of his length was Izzy Mukuamu. So we actually had him on the show. He was a guest of ours, and after kind of watching him and kind of seeing what he's capable of in terms of his length, his speed, he kind of, at least in my opinion, and I think Jake was on board after we kind of talked about it for a while, he has that unicorn physique that I think a lot of folks in the NFL love and are praying for. And he seemed like a versatile piece that you can bring anywhere. And so he actually had a lot of buzz within the Chargers Twitter sphere of us wanting him to be one of our corners potentially in like the 4th, 5th round. And then when you guys get him along with Micah Parsons, who I was also super high on, I was just like, well, Dallas did well.
Well, yeah, once the Twitter sphere is involved, then obviously the rest of us just have to sit back and just do what they tell us to do. Mukuamu is an interesting guy. He was inactive last week, but he was, as you know, a corner at South Carolina. He was the other corner, and they immediately converted him to safety. Dan Quinn, who took over for Gus Bradley at Seattle and helped grow the famous Legion of Boom, he likes those long defensive backs. He saw a little bit in Mukuamu potentially of some of what he had maybe in Cam Chancellor. I don't know if that's a little bit of a reach, but the body type was, I think, what Quinn was looking at. And Mukuamu had a good summer. He made the team on merit. He was inactive last week. He might be again. We'll see. They had a safety, Darian Thompson, who is a key part of their special teams, even though they had him on the practice squad. He hurt a hamstring last week. And so now they say they're going to activate Malik Hooker, who, coming out of college, as we all know, is a phenomenal player. I don't know who he is as a player right now, and I'm not sure he does. But I think that, they had to be better than last year, because they were so bad last year. It was just almost incomprehensible. They were statistically, historically bad for their franchise. I'm not criticizing them. I'm just reading you the numbers. They gave up more points and touchdowns than any Dallas team in history. They could not get out of their own way. They were awful. And that's why Quinn was brought in, changed out a couple of parts of the coaching staff. Players seem to have responded. There are some interesting things in examining them. And on defense, on offense, they're not an old team, but they're much more experienced. That defense is really young. So they have a couple, like one of their key pieces, actually, one of their key pieces is Neville Gallimore, a defensive tackle, their second-round pick last year. I thought he was their best interior defensive lineman in camp, and he's out for the first few weeks with an elbow dislocation. They drafted Linval Joseph in the second round when they couldn't get either of the two corners that they had their eye on, Horn or Surtain. He's got a hamstring, and so he's out for the first part of the year. So there's pieces they're missing. Randy Gregory, who I thought had a great summer, and I'm really looking forward to watching him. He's a fascinating personal story who has made amazing strides to put a misdirected life back together with counseling and medication, and a tremendous character. He's an enormously bright guy, and he had a really good summer. Well, he's on the COVID list right now. Now he's vaccinated. The report is so he went on the list. I don't know if it was Sunday or Monday. But since if it's correct that he's vaccinated, then he only needs consecutive. He's vaccinated and asymptomatic, according to reports, which is key because if you're asymptomatic, then you just need consecutive negative tests in a 24-hour period, and you can be activated again. So tomorrow's their first day of practice. He may or may not be back for then, but you got to think he's got a decent chance to be ready to go on Sunday. So DeMarcus Lawrence had a good game at the other end. Gregory's good. Parsons was a guy that I personally was very much in favor of their drafting because I saw him in the Cotton Bowl 2 years ago, and I looked at a lot of tape of Penn State getting ready for that game, in addition to him being the defensive MVP of the game. And I turned to my statistician, who's been with me for about 30 years. I said, can we just keep him here? Do we have to let him leave town? I mean, he's just awesome. He's an unusual player. Got some criticism on draft day because, you're not supposed to draft a linebacker. And to me, he's more than just a linebacker. Who's on the field could be partly determined by who the Chargers have on the field offensively, and then if the coaching staff wants to try to mix things up. Parsons was around the ball. He was not super active last week. I think he's got a chance to be a special player, but he's just learning. He's just got to figure out how to play. Everybody in LA knows what Herbert is, or they should. I mean, I just think the world of him. And he's super accurate, and he's got a cannon. And those receivers, and Jake, you mentioned them before, Williams and Allen especially. Man, those guys are really good. Really good. We've seen them before. It's been a while. Obviously, one of the interesting things about a game like this is the teams only play every 4 years. But those are really, really good players. And the Cowboys secondary is average. Now Diggs, the right corner, who was their second pick last year, he's got a chance to be special. But the safeties have got to prove it. All the rest of them have to prove it. They've got some talent, but the mantra among Dallas fandom was, with that offense, all they have to do is be average, just not the worst. I don't know how much you win if you aspire to be average. You just have to be really good that day. You have to be better than the other offense that day. They got 4 takeaways last week. It's a hard yes, it is. It's a hard thing to reconcile to yourself when you run 12 more plays than the other team and win the takeaway battle 4-1 and lose the game. And the time of possession too, but I don't pay much attention to that because it's what you do with it at the end of the possession. But those are statistics usually that'll win you the game, and it didn't. So I think that I think a lot of the Chargers players on offense. Here's another interesting thing. The big debate, once Surtain and Horn were gone, and they had Micah Parsons rated ahead of both of them, but not a lot. And if either one of those players had been on the board, they'd have taken the corner because they were desperate for a corner. Mm-hmm. But they weren't, and they knew what Parsons was. So the big debate in the draft room and in town was, when it came to that 12th pick, Parsons or Slater.
Chargers fans are so grateful.
Hey, I don't think either team could have gone wrong. The fact that Slater had the game that he had is not a surprise. It may be a surprise to some people because he's a rookie and because he was facing an outstanding defensive front. But that's not a secret or a surprise that young man's an exceptional player. And so there's going to be a lot of attention paid to that, especially if they put Parsons over him, which from time to time they might try to do. They'll line him up on the edge. like I said, I don't think either team could have gone wrong with either guy. And I think they're both going to be happy with the players they got. But it's just an interesting little side wrinkle to the game story.
Let's take a minute and talk about Dak Prescott. After everything that he has been through over this past year, you have to have nothing but the utmost respect for his skill set, his resiliency, again, for everything that he's had to deal with. And then getting back to training camp and dealing with, the lat injury and not being able to practice. You could just tell how much he was chomping at the bit to get back onto the field. As you had mentioned at the beginning of the show, to see him come back that way after spending so much time not practicing, rehabbing, everything that he did, to come out with a performance like that against the Super Bowl champions, what was it like for you to witness that, just to see him go out and ball out against Tampa Bay? And in the inner circles of the Dallas media, because obviously Dan and I don't know, but how much does Dak just truly mean to the city and to this team?
He's a really unusual young man, Jake, and what it meant to me, to answer your question, to watch him do that. It wasn't a big surprise, but it was really heartwarming. I haven't seen every Cowboys season. I've only been doing this job 43 years. I had the end of Staubach's career. I had all of Aikman's. I did not get to see Don Meredith play. I think that as a leader and a competitor, Dak Prescott is the equal of any quarterback they've ever had. Now, he's not the quarterback that those other guys were yet. You have to win.
We're talking to Brad Sham, the voice of the Dallas Cowboys ahead of the Week 2 matchup versus the Los Angeles Chargers. Let's get into a couple matchups that I think everyone is chomping at the bit to see. We now are fortunate enough to have two former Offensive Rookie of the Year winners square off on Sunday. We got Justin Herbert, Dak Prescott. Both quarterbacks, I think, were slept on a little bit prior to them both being drafted. And both, as you have mentioned, are seemingly absolute studs. What are folks in the media or folks there in Dallas, the fans, thinking or talking about Justin Herbert ahead of this game?
Dan, they don't know who he is. These people,
I love it.
These people here, they can't see past the end of their nose. Brady, they know. They know who quarterbacks that they know that Hurts quarterbacks the Eagles, and they don't think much of Daniel Jones, and they're not sure. Of course, nobody is who's quarterbacking Washington, and that's all they know. I mean, they know that Stafford went from the Lions to the Rams. They don't know about Justin Herbert. I'm afraid they're going to find out. He's a really good player, Justin Herbert. The fans here. Now, the team knows who he is. Don't worry about that. The coaches, Dan Quinn knows who he is. The coaching staff, they know plenty about him. And they have the kind of respect that I think everybody ought to have for him. Fans don't know anything about Justin Herbert, but they will.
I will say it was fun. One of the things that Jake and I got to talk about during the Week 1 review of the game against the Washington football team was getting to see kind of the respect from the Washington football team fans post-game. Most were very polite, but talking about how good Justin Herbert looked and how much they were not expecting that. I think both Jake and I were both like, well, we see it every week. But folks outside.
Let me go back to what I said at the very beginning when we started. I thought he was as good a quarterback as I saw in the league. The second half, certainly the last quarter of last year. Every opportunity I got to see the Chargers play, you'd watch him and you'd go, holy moly, look at this guy. And he's serious business.
Oh, it's a breath of fresh air for all Chargers fans, especially considering how last year started with that Week 1 with Tyrod Taylor, the Pierce Long, and all of a sudden, here we are. Okay, another one. You mentioned
Here's my question for you. Does anybody there remember Phillip Rivers?
They remember him, but I have a feeling they may just put him to memory very, very quick.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, did he play there a year? No, seriously. I mean, he was his career was in San Diego, right?
Yeah, yeah. He played. What was it, Dan? When they relocated, what was it? Yeah, he played about 3 years in LA. So they knew who he was, and
but
he left with a ton of respect.
He wasn't the L.A. Chargers quarterback. He was San Diego's quarterback.
Yeah,
technically, yeah, because he spent a majority of his career. Yes,
yeah,
so
Herbert for Los Angeles Chargers fans, Herbert is their quarterback.
Yes. Yep. And one of the matchups that we got to see last week was one Joey Bosa going up against a rookie in Samuel Cosme, and we saw who won that one. Terrence Steele, you mentioned it. Jerry Jones mentioned it. Is going to be starting at right tackle. How does the offensive line look going into week 2 against the Chargers defensive front? I mean, you got Joey Bosa, you got Chenna Nwosu, Kaiser White, Jerry Tillery, Linval Joseph, Kyler Fackrell. There's a ton of guys that this defense is probably going to bring in from a multiple viewpoint. You're going to see all kinds of fronts. How's the offensive line looking for you guys?
Well, I mean, I think that, look, Collins had a good game, and he's a good player. And so losing him is not good. And much as I hate the idea, I think Zach Martin's a Hall of Famer. And as much as I hate the idea of moving him outside, they know they're going to be fine. It's not like an injury where you don't know if it's a week or two. Collins is suspended for 5 weeks. They were like a kite flapping in the wind in the offensive line last year until they moved Martin out to tackle. And then it was like, okay, we may not be good, but we can compete. And McGovern is a way better player than he has been in his career. And he was a good player at Penn State. So, they have made a lot of money by not asking me what I think. But and I absolutely hate the idea of moving a great player. I think that there is something to the argument that if you move a player, you create uncertainty at 2 positions. But I don't think that Zach Martin is uncertain wherever you put him. And I'd like to see Terrence Steele come out of the game, kind of intact emotionally. They think he's a lot better than he was last year. They think he's a lot. In fact, he was one of their off-season award winners for what he did in the strength room, the conditioning room. Look, I'm not a coach or a scout. I don't know in preseason if I saw a tremendous improvement, but you have to presume they know what they're doing. I'm still not convinced that Steele is going to be what they're going to wind up doing. Tyron Smith's a potential Hall of Famer. He's a really, really good player, and that's a terrific matchup. Connor Williams is smart, the left guard. The knock on him, I think this is his 4th year, is that he was a little light. And his first year or 2, he could get really shoved around. He's learned a little bit more about leverage. He's a little stronger. I don't think anybody's going to confuse him with Larry Allen, but he's a competent player. Biadish is a young guy who, because he went to Wisconsin and Travis Frederick went to Wisconsin, everybody wants to compare him to Frederick. He's not Frederick. But I think he's got a chance to be a pretty good player. But he also can get manhandled a little bit. So those other guys that you mentioned in the defensive line for the Chargers, Linval Joseph's a veteran. They've seen him with a couple different teams. And Fackrell, if I'm not mistaken, was with Green Bay and the Giants. And he is an outstanding pass rusher. I know he's had some critical sacks against this team in the last few years, and they will know how to use him. Zeke Elliott's a really good pass protector, and there are going to be times that he's going to have to do that. Their offensive line, if they had Collins at right tackle, that would be an interesting battle to watch if Bosa lined up over him a good part of the day. That would be fun to watch. That would be one where you could go and just say, tell me what's going on with the ball, because I'm going to watch these guys. And that would be fun. But that's not going to happen. So they've got to figure out a way to account for that. And I think the rest of the offensive line's competent, but they're going to have their hands full.
We saw, I think Chargers fans know this all too well about
well.
poor special teams play. We got to talk about it. The Chargers special teams last year, you mentioned how historically bad the Cowboys were on defense. Chargers special teams last year was historically bad.
I think they created a new category of how bad they were.
What were they bad at?
Literally everything. They missed 9 kicks, more than any other team in football. They had 3 blocked punts when I think 22 teams had none. They were giving up returns. They couldn't get touchbacks. It was bad. They were bad at pretty much everything. And you saw that this year with this coaching staff. They put so much emphasis. And you heard a lot of the beat writers and folks who were at training camp. Nobody has seen as much emphasis on special teams during training camp as we saw with the Chargers. Now, flip that around. We saw Greg Zuerlein struggle a little bit for you guys in week 1. We heard that he had some surgeries and things were kind of going wrong, and now there's some guys bringing back from the practice squad. Like, how are you feeling about special teams? That's been a big emphasis for the Chargers. That was one of our Achilles' heels. How do you see the matchups on special teams?
Today, I don't feel good about the special teams. I thought it was a really significant part of the reason they lost the game. Zuerlein, he missed a 60-yarder, but that's a Hail Mary. That doesn't even count. But he missed a 31-yarder and he missed an extra point. So there's 4 points and they lost by 2. Because John Fossil thought, and he spoke about this yesterday. This is not me saying it. This is what he said himself. He decided that it would be a good idea to try to make Tampa Bay return the kickoffs. So they kicked them short. And the first one, they stopped them at the 20, and the next 2 were run out 40 yards. And let me just suggest, I'm not the smartest guy, but I don't think giving Tom Brady half a field is a real good idea. So they did that twice with poor kickoff coverage. I think Anger, who is their new punter, he's been with 2 or 3 other teams. He had a really good summer, Ryan Anger, but I think he shanked 1. So now, and then what really kind of made me scratch my head was when I listened to Fossil talk about it. And he said, you just have to remember that the guys who are on our special teams now, they never were on the field together at the same time in any preseason game. Now, John Fossil's a really good special teams player, really good. And and the Cowboys had 4 games, not 3. And I get that in preseason, you don't want to get your starters hurt, and you have to put guys on special teams who are contending to make the team, because that's how you're going to find out if they can help you on teams. You mean the guys that you thought were going to be your special teamers, you couldn't have got them out there a game, a half game, a few kickoffs, a couple of punts.
But we saw that all the time.
And again, John Fossil's forgotten more about special teams play than I will ever know. But that was a head scratcher. And so, as you guys well know, especially in his time with the Rams, probably was also true when he was with the Raiders. One of Fossil's specialties is trick plays. And for Dallas fans, one of the hallmarks of last season was their home game against Washington late in the year, might have even been Thanksgiving. And they were still in the NFC East race because all of those teams were awful last year, and they were in the race. They were like, if you win like 2 games in December, you're going to win the division at 7-9. Nice. So they've got a 4th down and 20-something at their own 20. Let me just say that again. Down and 20-something at their own 20, and they were trailing by, I think, 4 points. They ran a fake punt. from their own 20 in the fourth quarter, and it lost yardage. And they'd had like 2 or 3 other fake punts that during the year that they tried that didn't work. And that has some folks going, Now, I'm going to say again, John Fossil is one of the best special teams coaches in the league. He's aggressive. He's creative. His players love him. That was true when he was with the Rams. It was true when he was with the Raiders. It's true now. I don't feel like they've got a special teams edge coming into this game, and I don't know anything about the Chargers special teams yet.
Okay, that says something.
But I'm just telling you that special teams is one of the reasons they lost last week. Kickoff coverage, missed field goals, one bad punt. You can't have it when you're playing the world champions on their field to open the season. You have to be perfect in those areas to have a chance to win. And their special teams did not help them last week. And so let's be optimistic. Let's look at glass half full. They've got a great opportunity to improve in that department this week.
Let's talk about one of the bigger matchups going into this game, because you talk about the game that Dallas had, especially the wide receivers. 2 wide receivers specifically against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that went over 100 yards, Ceedee Lamb and Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper had a game that reminded everybody why the Dallas Cowboys traded a first-round pick for him, because he went berserk against this team, against the Buccaneers specifically. We know Michael Gallup is out this week with an injury. Cedric Wilson's going to step in his place, going to be the wide receiver 3. But you just see what Dak was able to, what type of offense he was able to create with these weapons. I mean, it's going to be a huge task for this Chargers secondary coming into this week's game. So what should we expect to see, like the biggest matchups? Obviously, Dallas is going to look to exploit some things. Chargers are going to look to try to stop certain aspects. But from your view, Brad, what do you take away from this?
Well, I mean, I think the fun thing from a spectator's point of view, Jay, is that they've got some weapons. Cooper's one of the best route runners in the league. And I'm not sure that wasn't his very best game in a Dallas uniform. On the road, tough crowd. And he had a reputation of being a guy who would drop one on you when he was with the Raiders. But that has not been a problem for him. And he's good. Lamb is a phenomenal athlete. He's a freak show as an athlete. To take the next step, he will drop one for you every now and then. And he dropped 1 or 2 last week. And that can't happen to take the next step. But I don't want to sound like I'm being critical of Ceedee Lamb. He's an exceptional player. And they're really lucky to have the 2 of them. And without Gallup, that's a dimension. But Cedric Wilson's a nice player, smart player, and he's got Prescott's confidence. We've seen him make big plays. They've got a couple of tight ends who can catch the ball pretty well. They've got a couple of running backs who are pretty good in the passing game. So I think that the things to watch are those. I think it depends on, Dak will go to the line of scrimmage. Like the people the other day were complaining that Elliott didn't have enough runs, this is great. I don't know how NFL coaches ever make a mistake with all the help they've got in that Twitter sphere that you already invoked, right? If they run him 20 times, then why are you not throwing to Cooper and Lamb? And then they ran him like 4 times, and you're not running. Oh, please. And Kellen Moore said on Monday that they had 28 runs called that Dak changed 12 of to passes because of what he saw, because of the look. So that's what fans don't understand. The quarterback has like 4 or 5 options on every play, and he's going to look at the defense and decide what makes the most sense to him. Almost all of these guys maybe not a brand new rookie, but most of these guys have the freedom to change things based on the look they get. So the answer to your question is what to expect. It depends on what looks the Chargers give them and who they throw the ball to and how often they run and which of the two running backs they run it with. That'll depend a lot on what the Chargers give them and what Prescott decides to do with it.
Well, let's talk about how much the Cowboys are going to run, because you brought it up. Obviously, Zeke Elliott, only 11 carries, 33 yards, definitely not one of his best games. I expect that to change in a hurry again this upcoming Sunday. I think he will have a much better game against the Chargers' interior defensive line, which I still believe is one of the biggest Achilles heels for this team. You have big guys in the middle like Linval Joseph, Justin Jones, Jerry Tillery still coming into his own. People are still waiting for him to eventually come into what they're to expect of a first round pick. But, I'm with you. The tempo of the game, the way that it was going, running the ball wasn't really working for Dallas, especially going up against that run defense. But again, I expect that to change this week, and I think it's going to free up a lot of opportunities for Dak. So Zeke Elliott, going up against this interior defensive line of the Chargers, I would assume that you would also agree, Brad, that it could be a bounce back game for Zeke.
So here's the thing: I don't think Zeke had a bad game. He didn't have a productive statistical running game, but he is a running back. He plays the running back position, and that includes blocking, and it includes receiving, and it includes clearing out. And he's really good at that stuff. He's one of the best blockers in the backfield for a really outstanding runner that I've ever seen. And if you look at some of the things that he did in the passing game, I would then challenge you to say that he didn't have a good game. He didn't have a statistical rushing game that is anything that he wants to send home and frame. But look, they want to run. The idea is, for most teams, you want to, if you can run, then you can throw when you want to. Some of it depends on how the game goes. You can intend to be 45% run, and if you turn the ball over, you give up a couple of touchdowns, and you're chasing the score, then the whole game plan's standing on its head, and everything changes. So the game dictates some of that. You absolutely want to run. I think he's an outstanding runner, and he definitely wants to run, whether it's up the middle or bouncing it outside. But Kellen Moore made an interesting point, and that is that what he's looking for is yards. He doesn't care how they get them. They had a play. They had a little jet sweep to Pollard that gained some nice yardage. So in the NFL, when the receiver comes around on the reverse on the jet sweep and the quarterback tosses it to him 2 feet, that's a pass. And then he goes running. And it doesn't. That was Kellen Moore's point. I don't care if we run it or throw it. We want yards. We're going to do what we can do to get yards. And if you can't run, then you throw. And if you can run, then you run and throw. They need for Elliott to rush for more than 30 yards a game, for sure. I think ideally what you want to do is be the kind of team that can be ahead by a couple scores, and then you run a lot at the end and you wear the other team down. Now, this is a different game. The rules are different than 30 years ago. 30 years ago, the pass defense rules are different. The formations that people run out of are different. They weren't doing the same things in the 90s. But in the 90s, the Cowboys had a lot of close games. And if they were ahead with 5 minutes to go, then you weren't going to win because you weren't going to get the ball anymore. Because they were going to grind you down and they were going to give the ball to Emmitt Smith, and he was going to run for about 5 minutes. And that would be the end of the game. But that's not how football. You can't. That's not how football is played now. So, would they like Elliott to have more than 30 yards rushing? Yes, absolutely. It's going to depend on how the Chargers play and what the flow of the game is.
Brad, I feel like I'm going to go listen to this probably 3 or 4 times and just take notes on all of the nuggets that you've given us. And by the way, thank you so much for doing this again.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I think it's interesting. I don't think fans in LA or Southern California or just Chargers fans in general understand, like, you got to call Super Bowls like with your home team and they won. Like, you're kind of one of the best. And so your perspective, I think, is something that I'm probably going to cherish for a long time. So, okay, look, all of this being kind of taken into account, put on your wizard hat for a sec.
Here it comes.
How do you see this game going? Like, what's your feel?
Dan, you can ask me 16 different ways if you want. And I am just starting to watch the Chargers. And then for most of the next 2 days, I will be atoning for my sins. So I won't have any clue until I have watched some more of the Chargers and have a little better handle on it, what they did with Washington last week. But I think it's going to be a game. Right now, I think it's a game that either team could win. I think they're both pretty good teams. I think the Chargers are underappreciated and undervalued. And my hope, from my perspective, is that the Cowboys are not among the people who are doing that. Because if they are, they're going to be in for a long day Sunday afternoon.
Now, have you had a chance to go to SoFi Stadium yet?
No, because last year, COVID, and they opened with the Rams, and we were doing the games from here. So I'm very excited to see it. I hear just all the greatest things. And, that Jerry Jones was instrumental in that stadium being built on that site, on the Rams going where they went. And he had a lot to do with that. So he's very proud of it, and he should be. And it's going to be the Western capital of the NFL for a very long time. And some of the people who were involved in building AT&T Stadium were involved in designing SoFi. And I have heard that it is a technological wizard in Los Angeles, California. What else would you expect? I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is the first time, obviously, for fans too going in for a regular season game. I will be there at the game on Sunday. I'll wave to you in the press box when I see you, if I see you. Brad, Sham, thank you so much for coming on the show. For folks who do not know to follow for all things Dallas Cowboys or just Texas sports in general, you can find him on Twitter at boys_Vox, VOX. Brad, thank you so much for joining us on Chargers Unleashed. It's been a pleasure. Good luck to you and the team on Sunday, and best of luck the rest of the year, all right?
Thank you. You don't mean that part about good luck Sunday, but it's okay. It was a polite
another week except this one.
Thank you, guys. Have a good week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Keenan Allen.
The Los Angeles Chargers select Rashawn Slater.
Asante Samuel Jr.
Stop! Oh, I'm stopping y'all boys. I can't catch it.
Intercepted. Picked up by Michael Davis. Explosiveness from Ekeler. There's Murphy. Boy, he blew that up, didn't he? It is picked off. Nasir Adderley. 50-50 ball is 100%. Mike Williams.
Ojeda Nwosu. And that will end it.
Time to bolt up.